Okay, everybody here? Okay, calm down. Settle down. Grab your seat. Thanks for coming out tonight. Our investment learning here for Hive Real Estate. We have Tyler Kazare is going to present. We have Jason Christiansen with Security Home Mortgage. And we have Greg with Rudd & Hawks Title. And we're going to learn a little bit about investments from you guys. All right, your turn.
All right. Now I need the mic. All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm Tyler Kazare, Hive Collective real estate agent. I think I know actually most of you here, so that's pretty good. Tonight we're talking about home investment strategies, and we're going to cover a lot of ground tonight. And we're gonna hop right in. So here's our agenda. We're gonna talk about what we're doing, where we're going. We're gonna talk about why we want to invest, and what the big deal is. We're gonna talk about getting your cash in order. That's where our guest finance expert comes in. That's where Jason will talk. And then we're gonna talk about real estate investment strategies, and we've got quite a few of them. And they're gonna follow this amazing pattern. Step one, we'll tell you what the strategy is. Step two, we'll tell you what the tips and tricks are. And then step three, we'll tell you the stupid things not to do. Okay, so we'll make sure that you don't become victim to all of the well-known mistakes of those investment strategies. Then we're going to talk about seller financing and 1031s and what those are and why you care. And then we're going to wrap up and finish off and have our conclusion. So first, I'm going to kick this over to you for a little while and let you carry the microphone. Do you want a scarf to?
All right. So everybody wants to quit and get money for free, right? It's kind of possible it takes a little bit to get there. So quitting your job, maybe not right away. Awesome retirement, totally easy. And extra cash, like now you can do. It takes a little bit to get into it, but that's what we're going to cover. So some good quotes to start out with. Mark Twain, buy land and not making it anymore, besides in Hawaii. You always got the caveat, right? Don't wait to buy real estate and wait. This is actually really, really pertinent. But then, if you look at the really wealthy, they've all invested in real estate. It's a very secure investment. And this is why. Over time, it's always increased. There's benefits for it, for taxes and keeping your money growing in a safe place. And then it's always around, you can't have it lose its value and disappear overnight like other types of investments that vanish. If any of you have questions, feel free to jump in. Okay, there's lots of ways you can invest in real estate. And not just buying an investment property. That's what everybody thinks of. But you get there. All right. So we're going to start with a graph. And this. This is what we see. Okay, so this is all made up numbers. And I use made up numbers because they're a lot easier to understand. And we know that this isn't how anything worked, but if in the year 2000 you bought a $150,000 home, which was a decent starter home, nothing fancy, and we said that you got 100% financing on it, so you got a loan for $150,000, and then you got a 4% interest rate, which is kind of where they've been for a while. So nothing's out of the ordinary or crazy. If you did that, you'd have zero equity, and you'd have about a $1,000 mortgage payment. Now that number's wrong as well. It's a little higher, but that's about what rent was for a similar house. So we're just making it super easy to understand and see. The other thing we did is we took a standard 4% appreciation, which wasn't the case because we had some negative stuff here and like 10% here. But over the years, it's been higher than 4%. So we're just looking at this, and then average rent increase is 3.5% a year. If you look at this, by the end, you'll notice that your house is worth more than twice as much. You don't owe as much. You're about halfway paid off. So it means you've got a lot of equity, $240,000. Here's the interesting thing. If you buy, your mortgage payment's $1,000. In 29 years, it's $1,000. Rent increases typically, right? So if you started renting the same house and your landlord increased the rent at standard rate, your rent would just about double. And that's where you make money in real estate. That's why you buy. Here's a graph that shows the same thing. So this is what your rent does. In the green line, there's your mortgage balance. In the red line, and your appreciation. So it's pretty safe. A standard mutual fund, they say, makes 8%. So when you're buying a home, you get the value of appreciation, but the other thing, what the interest you're paying is tax deductible, so you get shelters like that. And then you're building equity as well. Okay. So who knows how much it takes to buy an investment property? What do you need to start out with?
100 grand.
That's a good number. Typically, you want 25% if you're going to buy an investment property down, but
Is it 20 or 25%?
I say you want 25%.
Okay.
You need 15 if you're going to buy an investment property.
Okay.
The less you have down, the more expensive it is. But the other thing I like to say is who has, so an investment property, real estate agents, what does investment property go for? Just standard single family residence, starter home you're going to rent out in the market right now.
300,000.
300,000. So 25%, 300,000. You've got, hit us up, 75? 75,000 is kind of a bit. So one thing you can do, a strategy, I mean jumping around a little bit, is buying a home yourself. How much do you need to buy a primary residence? 3.5 is one, 0, 5%, all gets you in, depending on where you are and what you can do with the home, right? And that's doable. So the first things you want to do is get funds to buy your house, get your credit score in order. So you need a down payment, but the more you put down, the more options you have and the safer your loan is. Because a lot of times people come in and they say to me, hey, I'm a first-time home buyer, I want to get a special deal, special program. The fact of the matter is, the more special the deal, the more expensive the money is. The higher the risk, the higher the cost. Now there's different loan programs that have different risk thresholds that are backed by different government agencies, and so they'll have lower interest rates, and you can work those. But you always want to start with as good as you can get, and improve your credit. Let's hit really quickly just things you want to do for credit and how that works. Credit scores, the bureaus work just like three friends. If you had three people and they were going to lend money, they would want to know who you were, and they would want a history of lending and a history of repayment. So people who've never borrowed have a hard time getting credit, or people who have borrowed everything they possibly can, or people who haven't made their payments on time have a hard time. So those are things you want to watch, because when it comes time to invest, and investing has a higher hit to credit score than other loan programs, so you're going to want to watch that.
Question?
Yeah.
At what age can you start building credit? How young?
I actually don't know. I know it's younger than 18.
Okay.
So one thing I've done with my kids is I co-sign on credit cards with them. I'll get them a bank account, I'll get them on a Visa, and then let them burn down their $100 balance, because they can't go that wrong. And by that time, when they start getting older, they've got credit established. So.
$100. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Bail them out. It's a whole lot easier than bailing them out from a house or a car. You know, if they understand how it works, and I don't plan on co-signing with them ever. So that's that. Okay, this is investment. So let's say, because I hear a lot of people saying flips, like, hey, I'm going to make a lot of money in flips. That's a short-term investment. Now the IRS has a specific way of looking at investments. There's a clean line between short-term and long-term investments. Anybody have a guess where that's at?
12 months.
More specifically, 12 months is really close.
This is on your screen now.
It's 365 days. Boom. Like
Okay.
right there. So just to be clear. So
I should change my slide to 365 days.
365 days. Because like if you go, like I've had it 12 months and you're just shy, it doesn't matter because you actually list on the tax return how long you've owned the property and that's your tax rate. So if you have a long-term investment held over a year, you're going to be taxed at regular taxes. If you have short-term investments, you're being taxed at capital gains. So capital gains tax is money, you take your tax bracket and you throw that money on top of it, and then you're taxed at that tax rate. So it's a lot higher. So if you're looking into flipping a house, you're gonna wanna look at the impact on your income, because you're probably gonna use a third of it.
If you decide to do house flipping,
Yes,
if you take it as regular income, you can have your account, if it's something you do on a regular basis,
yes.
like.
If this is your income, and
If
typically you're gonna
this is
pass
your
it through your
income,
business,
you-
as
you
business
put it- yeah,
income, yeah.
You can still take it as regular income and not capital gains. But if it's not something that you do regularly, like if you move into the house and you live there and you decide to sell it, you will get capital gains. So
Right.
there are some,
Find a good account loopholes.
there's some different ways to look at the income depending on what your intention was with it when you bought it. Like if you're just buying it and rehabbing it and selling it
Right.
versus living there for a year and selling it. But I don't know, maybe that would even work too if it was your intention to always sell it in a year. If you move in, you know, pay.
Well, then where you're moving your money, if you
Yeah.
move that money into another primary residence, it's taxed differently than if you take it and keep it, because then it's not a
Correct.
gain.
Yeah.
So,
But basically, yes.
yeah. Okay,
So here's a question to
Yeah.
that one. As a title person, there's a questionnaire that we give people when they sell their houses.
okay,
And the first question that's asked is, have you lived in the property as your primary residence for 2 of the last 5 years?
yeah.
What's the difference between that rule and this rule? This one says 1 year.
So
The other
this
one
is
says 2
determining
years.
income, like how they're gonna count, how they're gonna tax you on your income. So if the rule on primary residences, if you've had it as your primary residence 2 of the 5 years, one of the couples has lived there, then that income up to, as a married couple, it's $500,000, as a single, it's $250,000, is not taxed. So that's not income.
Yeah, there's no capital gains tax, but why is it 2 years versus 1 year? This is.
Short-term versus long-term,
Okay,
taxed or not.
okay. So
So-
it's just,
If you sell your house and you make a profit on it, your primary residence, that's not considered income.
We're not counting that as income.
I see.
So,
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
oops, that's the wrong way. So confusing. Okay,
You want me to run the math here?
yes, please. Fire away.
Alright. Got it. No scarf to mess me up here, but it's still, hard for me to like.
In my mind, you're always looking scar.
That's good, I'm glad. So, in my mind too. Alright, so this is the slide that everybody gets scared at because it has math on it. I'm gonna boil it down for you, it doesn't hurt. And I'm gonna go through every step with you and I'm showing my work, guys. So it's all shown. Okay, so I'm gonna introduce you to a couple of terms. ROI is return on investment, okay? That's, every investor is gonna talk to you about ROI. COC is cash on cash, okay? That means, how much cash did I put in and how much cash did I take out on that cash, right? It's the most common form of measuring an easy return on investment. GAR is gross annual rent. We're gonna talk about a rental strategy here for just a minute. And then your net ROI is after you've taken everything out, okay? So I'm gonna work through this with you and show you what it is, okay? This is why we invest, right? ROI is why we invest. If you have a negative ROI, that's a nice way of saying I'm losing money. That's not a good thing. You want a positive ROI. Even if your ROI is negligible, if it is in the positive, you're making money, and that's a good thing. Hold on to that property. If that property is costing you money, if it's negative ROI, you really have to evaluate why you're holding it. If you're holding it for a growth mindset, that's a different story. But if you're holding it for income, you want positive ROI. Okay, so cash on cash, this is what we're gonna talk about. Okay, how much is coming in, how much is going out? So let's take some numbers, right? A $200,000 house. We used a $300,000 house in Jason's example. I'm gonna use a cheaper one in mine, $200,000 house in mine. And we're gonna say it's gonna cash flow $1,000 a month. Depending on where you are, that could change, obviously. If you're up in Salt Lake County, it could be higher than that. If you're down in, I don't know, like Nephi, forget it. Like, you're not gonna make $1,000 a month on it. Your gross annual rent, your GAR, is gonna be $12,000 on that house, right? Because $1,000
So you're
times
saying cash
12
flow
months.
1,000 is that's what rent is?
Yes.
Okay.
Rent is $1,000, and you as the landlord, that's what you're collecting, right? So you're gonna make $12,000 this year on that. That's your GAR, your GAR. Okay? Now, your gross ROI. I should have highlighted that one as well. But your gross ROI is basically, I'm making $12,000 a year, and it costs me $20,000 to get into the house. So my ROI is 0.6 or 6%, right? That's my gross ROI. But that doesn't tell the whole story. There's expenses in this house. There's vacancy in this house. There's taxes on this house. There's insurance on this house. Those are all things you want to take out. Now, a lot of investors that I know, they just take 20%. They say, well, I'm going to be conservative. I'm going to take 20% out of that number, and that's going to cover my taxes. That's going to cover repairs, maintenance, insurance, all of these things, right? And so they take that out. They're only left with 80%. That's what that 0.8 is, right? So 12,000 times 0.8 is 9,600. That's your net cash flow, right? That's what you're really, conservatively making in a year. Take that net cash flow and divide that by the amount you put in, the 200,000, and that's your net ROI. This is the number you care about. That net ROI, that is the number that matters, okay? Your gross ROI can be positive, and your net ROI can be negative. If you have a net ROI that's negative, you have a serious problem. It's time to rethink what you were doing, okay? But that's as complex as the math gets, okay? There's a lot of ways to evaluate different properties. This is the fundamental way of evaluating an income property. Yeah, Greg.
I'm assuming you're not taking into account mortgage payments. This is as if you owe.
Nope, you brought $200,000 into this house.
Yeah.
You brought that as cash.
I see.
Okay, and we're going to talk about a lot of different ways of how to invest. That may or may not be a good strategy, depending on how much cash you have on hand.
Yeah.
This is assuming you brought 200K. If you only brought, maybe you brought 50K to this house, right, or 65K, whatever that magic number is of what you need to have down, then your investment, and we'll talk about this in a second, your investment is what you brought to that house, right? The expenses here would be higher than 20% because those would now be counted as your debt service.
Right.
Okay, very good question.
Okay.
Okay, let's pop forward on that. Actually, before we go forward, does anyone have any questions on the real estate math section? We're going to leave it behind.
And
here,
even if your costs would go up, your initial investment would be lower, so your net ROI would still be high.
Right.
That would almost balance out.
So there's kind of an interesting math situation, phenomenon that happens. The less money you bring to the house, the higher your ROI is, right? Because if you bring 20,000 to the house versus 200,000 to the house, the number you divide by, you can have a really
As long as you're not negative.
But
as long
then
as
you have
you're-
to care a lot more about
yeah,
that debt service number.
Yeah, the net, if your net is negative, then it doesn't matter anymore.
Right, right, exactly. Very good point. Okay, so and actually one of the strategies we're going to talk about here, there's 3 strategies for increasing your ROI, right? The first one is change your bottom line. Either bring in more dollars or send less out, right? Most common way to add more dollars to a property is to add coin-op laundry, vending machine, something, like have them pay for something that's in the house, right? Way to bring the cost down, make your tenants pay utilities. Say, hey, I don't care how much you spend for your AC in the winter, or your I really don't care how much you spend for your AC in the winter, but your AC in the summer, spend it up all you want. You're going to pay for that, right? I'm going to relieve myself as landlord from that challenge, right? You can put utilities. You can choose to pay the utilities and pay a set fee. A lot of landlords I see do this. Choose to average out whatever it is that you're doing in a year. Divide that by 12, right? That's how you get the average. And then add about 15% and charge that, right? So they're actually making money on the utilities, assuming that usage doesn't change. But that makes it nice for a tenant because it's you know, I don't have to pay any expenses on top of my rent, right? So you can even upsell that to say, hey, you know, I'm doing this for you. I'm making your life easier, you know? Negotiate with the property manager for a lower rate. A lot of times if you have, it's the Costco mentality. You got 9 homes with a property manager. You hit the 10th one, they give you a price break, right? So there's an incentive to add another property. A friend of mine just did this in another state. He had 9 properties and literally bought one more property because it saved him so much money. It made more sense to buy another
Just to
property
get the price
just to get the price break.
cut from
Yep.
the manager.
Which was interesting.
That's fine.
Change your insurance premiums, change or focus on tenant retention. One of your biggest expenses in the landlord strategy, which we're going to talk about here in a second, is vacancy, because you make no money on vacancy. Even if you're charging less rent, if the prevailing rent in the area is $1,200 and you charge $1,100, that sounds like you're losing money until you account for vacancy, because the $1,100 property will always have a tenant in it. The $1,200 property may not. Yes, you're going to lose $100 every now and again, or, you know, on a monthly basis. Maybe it's $1,125. Maybe you charge $1,200, but you have the utilities included. Whatever the case is, you want to make sure that your property is attractive compared to the other properties around you, because that keeps your vacancy down. The biggest expense you have in a landlord strategy is vacancy. That's where no money comes in, but dollars go out. The bank's getting paid. The utilities are getting paid. Everybody's getting paid except the landlord. So make sure your property is rented. Okay.
I have a comment on that. As a landlord myself for many years, tenant retention is the other side of the coin of tenant selection.
Yes.
If you pick the right tenant, you will have increasingly less headache than if you pick the wrong.
I have a small section on that during our
Oh,
presentation, but
okay.
I don't do it justice.
Oh,
You're right.
man. Well, it's just, yeah, I've had tenants that pay rent on time every time. They fix up the property, they mow the lawn, they ask me if they can improve the property for me and redo the bathroom. And I say, yeah, sure, I'll pay all the expenses for you to do any of the upkeep and the remodeling that you wanna do. Just let me know what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
And then I've had tenants that left big pools of bloody vomit on the ground in the carpet and tore out copper and stole appliances because they were drug addicts. And,
Oh, there's tons of
and they
horror
had big
stories.
problems. And so that's opposite end of the spectrum. You want tenant A.
Yes.
And selection of tenants is the most important item in tenant retention that you could ever do in your entire life. Remember that. Don't get a
Tell us how
crappy
you
tenant.
feel about it.
And eviction process, and then if they fight you, man, it is just hell on earth. Hell
Yes.
on earth with a bad tenant. So, and
Yeah.
then, on top of the tenant wrecking the property, they also do not pay rent while you're trying to evict them from the property that they are wrecking.
Yeah.
It's hell with a bad tenant. It is complete bliss and nirvana with a good tenant.
There you go. So go for Nirvana. We want Nirvana.
Nirvana.
Okay. So this is what we were talking about earlier, actually refinancing cash out of your house. Very common property or strategy we'll talk about a little bit later called BRRRR. We'll talk about this, what BRRRR means. But one of the R's in BRRRR is refinance. That's how you get paid, right? So you get this property under contract. If you're using a HELOC or something off your house, we'll talk about that a little bit. You have access to money. You go refinance that equity out, right? That's the E in ROE is return on equity, right? So you can take your equity back out, and now all of a sudden, of that $200,000 house that you brought $200,000. Maybe you brought it, you know, maybe it was off a HELOC or something like that. You bring the $200,000, you put it in the house. Now that $200,000 can't buy you anything. It just bought the house, right? In a year, you refinance that back out of the house. And now you have a standard mortgage on that house, but you've got access to that $200K again. And you can go buy another house and do the exact same thing if you choose to do so, if it fits in your property strategy. Okay, so changing your ROE, be aware of what's affecting your returns, right? Your debt service, that's what we call it, that's a fancy jargon word for mortgage payments or the payments that you're making to a bank, your debt service matters, and it changes your percentages, your ratios, and lenders love ratios. So get your ratios right, lenders will love you. Okay, and then the last thing, move the equity out of your property. This is where a 1031 exchange comes in. This is where you can actually trade that property and move to a different property. But, and Greg will talk about this a little bit later, you must change like for like. You can't change, they have to be apples to apples. You can't change an orange for an apple. They get really upset about that. Well, it's not that you get upset about it, you can't do it.
You can't sell a house and buy stock.
Exactly.
You have to buy another real estate. You can sell stock and buy stock. You can sell real estate and buy real estate with 1031. It's the other word for it is like kind exchange.
Yep. I won't get into that right now because
Yeah.
we have slides for you.
Yeah. Shut up, Greg.
Okay. I wasn't going to say that. All right, so let's kick over again to investing with no money down. Or is that me? No, that's you. You're no money down, right? I was about to give you the clicker. Well, you can have the clicker. But I'll give you the microphone. In a couple of slides. 3 or 4 slides. Sure. Bring her.
Just keep going.
Yeah,
She'll
you're
wait.
good. Yeah,
Okay. So, wholesaling is where you find a property for somebody and sell it to someone else. This is difficult. It's a possibility. We're not going to talk about it a lot. Partnering is where you find property for someone else, kind of like work as a real estate agent. I'll find the property, I'll do the legwork, you have the money, we'll go into it together. And then buy a home. This is where like you come in as your primary residence, right? You do a Utah housing, you do a USDA, and then you get the home, zero down, and then you can either restructure the loan like of Utah housing, and do a conventional loan while you still live there, better terms, so the property can be an investment property, and move on that way. Okay, so, I'm not sure where we put my,
We're talking landlord strategy first.
let's see. Okay, all right. So, investing in real estate, there's a few ways to do it. We're gonna hit mostly these, and single family, multifamily. So, investing in real estate, the easiest way is to be a landlord, because you can do as easy as like renting out a room, and that can offset. So I have a lot of, used to be more, the summer sales guys. They'd make a bunch of money, they'd get a good down payment, they'd buy a house owner occupied, and then they'd rent out rooms. So they would still live there, and then their roommates would pay their whole house payment. And I know a few guys, you just collect properties like this, and it's great because they already have like 4 or 5 tenants in there that are making the entire mortgage, and they just ditch and buy another owner-occupied property. So that's a really good way to do it. Everyone in here married? Who's single? It works better when you're single. Just saying. Seller financing. That's another one where you can make good money. It's difficult. You want to talk to Greg to make sure you set it up right and get the right safety measures down. But there's lots of times, like I have people all the time that have a bankruptcy or a short sale or a derogatory on their credit that doesn't allow them to buy a house, and they have money. They just don't qualify for conventional financing. And if you have a property, you can sell it to them at very good terms because they don't have another option. And then the fix and flip, where you go in, you buy a property, and you sell it at a profit. Now that's hard to do in our market because there's a lot of very well educated, handy people around. If you're looking to do fix and flips, the South is a really good place for it. So, anyway, this is where we start. So a lot of people don't have 25% down to buy an investment property. So start small, get your feet wet. It's a lot easier to get your buddy out of your house than to get a tenant out of a house you don't own. It's a lot easier to see how your house is being treated when you live there than when you're dropping it by. So, board a room, Next up on some mother-in-law apartment, and I can finish out your basement. You always want to check with your code and the city regulations, because while it's unlikely, neighbors get picky. They don't like people parking, they don't like the noise of having tenants. And if you have tenants there a lot, check with what's legal. So almost always you can rent to family, and then beyond that, check. And then VRBO and Airbnb, you're gonna definitely want to talk to the city, because I know a lot of people who won't buy a home to do short-term rentals, and they don't check with the implications. So like for instance, if you're buying in St. George and you're not gonna own or occupy your property tax, not just the zoning or than anything else, increases dramatically. So
If you do a short term rental.
if you do a rental,
Or-
period,
Oh, any rental at all?
in St. George. In Hurricane, you can do rentals and your property taxes are the same, but you gotta meet zoning. And then you gotta meet your city zoning and maybe your community zoning. So you always gotta check with your HOA and the city. And go to the city first. Like, I actually got this tip from a real estate agent. They said, don't trust the real estate agent, go to the city. So, go to the horse's mouth. Okay,
Question for you real quick.
yeah,
I have a daughter that's going to college next year, and I
Yeah.
thought about buying a house on campus
yeah.
and then having students live in there and
Sure.
rent the rooms. Can I buy it owner occupied if my daughter lives there, or would she have to be entitled?
Your daughter can buy it owner occupied. And this is actually interesting, like if you're writing the purchase contract and you sign it as you're buying it, and then you add an addendum where your daughter's on it,
Okay.
you're still investment property. If you write that purchase contract where your daughter's buying it and you're co-signing it, it's kitty condo, owner occupied, she lives there, you don't, you're in with your 3.5% down FHA, 5% down conventional, both allow, both blend income. Your daughter doesn't need to have a job. She just can't have horrible credit because you're gonna be qualifying, right? And this is where you get your daughter the visa as soon as she turns 18 and, or whatever. So she has credit, so she can be on the loan, because loans use the lowest mid score of all the borrowers.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a great way. And then how long would your daughter have to live there so you're not committing mortgage fraud?
2 to 4 years?
1 year.
Oh, 1 year.
It has to be the intent.
I thought you were asking me how long she would.
Yeah, so almost always
4 years.
you're good to go.
Depending on what.
8 years, 8 years. Lots of people take 8 years to go to college.
It's intent, not actuality. I was actually helping some guys from Texas buy a condo up here, and they're sending their daughter to BYU, and they're like, we don't know if we can, in all honesty, have her sign a paper that says she's going to live there for a year because she's going to BYU and she might get married. It's like, it's
Yeah.
really appreciate your honesty, but
3 months in, she's engaged. But
yeah.
first semester marriage.
All right, so
Keep it for the divorce. Later.
I love it. Okay, so when you're buying houses, it's really important to know that you are investing. I used to be a salesman. I guess I still am a salesman, but I used to be a furniture salesman. And the thing you wanted to do is to engage emotion. Look how beautiful it is. Look how comfortable it is. You don't want to, you're not selling an item, you're selling an experience. If you come into a mattress, you're like, how much is a good night's sleep worth to you? And then you give statistics about how much better your brain performs on good sleep and how much longer you live, right? And then they're buying a lifestyle, not a mattress, and thousands of dollars, right? You want to stay out of that with a house. You're buying an investment. You're going to look at cash flow. You're going to look at how easy it is to rent, how well it's built, how easy it will be to maintain, how accessible it is, right? Don't let your wife look at it and just design it. Bad idea, right? No emotion.
We know a guy.
Kick tires like crazy. So the more experience you have, the easier you're going to be able to see a good deal or get a good real estate agent who knows what you're looking for. My first investment property, I told all the agent friends I have, this is what I'm looking for. I want a good deal. I took a home equity line of credit out on my primary residence, and then I waited. And I just waited, I don't know, it was a few months. And I had a real estate agent call me in a panic. Home appraisals for $200, they've got it listed for $175. I thought we had some time. They need it sold in 2 weeks. I think they'll take $150. And so I wandered over and said, okay, right? And that's it, because they had circumstances. And that's where you want to be. You want to see the good deals and buy in a good deal and buy an investment. Like, this is the area I like, this is what'll work. The other thing you can do is know your customer, who you're going to rent to and why. So like if you're buying by a college, you know, that demographic, you can research really easy what things are going for, what people pay for a room. All you have to do is get on KSL, Craigslist, and check. When I bought, I actually had a tenant before I bought. I knew that they needed a spot, and I knew what they could pay in rent. And so I made sure I cash flow right from the get-go. But keep this as non-emotional, fact-based decision. That's all you're doing is you're trying to get a good return on your investment. We'll kick that one. Let's see. Okay. If you're managing your own property, let's go here. This is good. All right. Ask people questions like mad. Learn from others. A smart person learns from their mistakes. A genius learns from others, right? So this is how you can really mess it up. Now, one thing, I rented to my good friend, and I got a contract, and I got a deposit, and I told him the terms, and it was super, super clear. And this was okay because he was my friend, and that's how I addressed it. A lot of times people will say, like, I'm your friend, don't you trust me, I'm something, and say, yes, we have a good relationship of trust, that's why we're gonna do this on a contract, so we both understand, so we can maintain that relationship. If you don't have a contract, eviction becomes very difficult because there's no terms. Don't use a property manager. So people tend to be compassionate. I like to be kind. So if they come on hard times, it's hard to excuse rent. But any of these things need to be very clear and concise of what's going to happen if, right? If you don't know the person, absolutely do a background check. Absolutely pay credit or check their credit. One of the things that, like in lending, if they have medical collections, it's not counted against their debt. But if I'm renting and my person has a ton of medical collections, I'm going to be less likely to rent to them because for whatever reason, if they can't make their rent payment, I don't make my money. I still have a mortgage payment. So there's things you want to look for on qualifying your renter, right? Find out how to evict and find out the best way. One of my favorite ways to evict is after rent is missed, a couple times, go in and say, hey, you must be having a hard time, what's going on? Okay, I see that it's rough. If you move out within a week, I'll give you $1,000. Like, I know it's rough, I'll give you your full deposit back. Thank you so much. I've really appreciated being your landlord. Have a great life. Because then you don't miss a month's rent or 3 months' rent while they trash your place while you're evicting them. So you can be super nice and kind. When you're asking for references, never ask their current landlord. I always go 1 or 2 back. Because if their current landlord's shady and they're horrible, they're going to say, they're fantastic, I love them to death. Because they want them out, right? So.
As the reference?
As the landlord,
As the landlord?
I gave a good reference because I wanted them gone.
That's on camera now.
The mic's not back there. No. Anyway.
I've never even thought of that. That's
Yeah.
really sneaky.
Anyway. Never visit the property. You want to do visits. You want to know your people. You want to know what's going on in their lives. Like this is a business. You are running a business. Get to know your people. Know who you're working with, right? Give discounts if for monthly inspections. I love rent is $1,500 a month. You mow the lawn, you keep up the yard, I knock off 50. You do this, I knock off 50, I knock off 50. Knock off visit, you're come by, check on the house. Whenever I want, I'll knock off this much. So they're happy to see you. So they're happy to take care of the property. Keep people happy, which is the opposite of being a jerk.
So you've had investments, rentals. Have you done been the landlord property manager, or did you hire somebody?
I was landlord property manager. But I was unique. I knew my tenants before I knew my property. So, and my deal was, I will never go in here. You maintain everything, and he named his rent. So, like he got rent. Yeah, it was a lot less, but like I nothinged, and I got my checks. So it cash flowed. That's all I cared about. So that's me. So, but the other thing is I did my research. I knew what would work. That was where I wanted to be. So that's that. Everybody okay with that? Any questions? Okay. And then the nice landlord is, yes, you can pay late. Yes, you can have a dog, even though we didn't agree to a dog. So the one thing that I have discussions with about landlords is large pets. So what I recommend is,
A tiger, can I bring it in?
so the answer is always yes. And then I look at liability. So my carpet's going to be ruined. My walls are going to be ruined. My whatever. I've got a 2-year lease. That's a $5,000 cost. 5,000 divided by 24 is this. That's how much it costs to have your animal. There you go. So when they move out, I'm replacing all that stuff. Just plan on it. If they were really good with their large animal and I don't, then whee, you know? That's, so.
And actually, I think I might skip ahead to LZ because she is our next slide, I think. LZ, you want to come up and talk to this for this? And I'll go back for this slide, but I want to give you this cool microphone.
Oh, wow.
And
Because I can't speak loud enough
well,
right here?
it's right over
Oh, I
here.
see, it's tied into the camera.
Gotcha.
Okay,
And I
great.
just put this up here. You can deviate as much as you want from that. So,
Okay,
we're
all
loving
right.
it.
I am the property manager here at Presidio Property Management. I have been a real estate agent for about 14 years, and I've been a property manager for 11 of those. I was with another company for 10 years and opened up here last year, so I've been with them a year. So the big thing about property management is a lot of the stuff that he reviewed is basically this is a business, and the reason to hire a property manager is that some people can't divorce themselves from that, from the business aspect. Because you may even have friends that you're renting to, and your friends get a better deal and they promise they're going to fix up the house for you, so they get this cheap rent and then they never fix it up, but then you don't want to go collect on them and enforce it. So a property manager can just enforce everything right up front. So we screen tenants. They will apply, and most of us that are doing this professionally will have software that does this. So people apply online, they get charged their fees, and then we have connections with screening companies, TransUnion, that will provide us their credit and background checks. One of the big things I also check often as part of that in the landlord section is that they'll give me the name of a landlord, and I will act, and if I feel a little, after about 10, 11 years of this, I get where I can kind of tell when people are lying or when they're not giving me all of it, but I will check county land records, which is easy to do here in Utah County. I will actually check the name of the person they gave me against the actual owner of the property. And then I will call their landlord and the landlord they gave me and ask them their name and do they own the property and what's the address of the property. And then they start stumbling. And a lot of times it will happen with a lot of people that are from this area or foreign nationals, because it's difficult sometimes for them to get into rentals. So a lot of times they will rent rooms from their friends, and that's who they'll use. And I can't use that as an actual rental reference because they're not the owner of the property. I need to know if the owner of the property is collecting rent. So it's another way to get into the truth of that. It's not that I won't rent to them, it's just that I need to have truth. Somebody even one time gave me the address of a vacant property in Springville. So I looked that up. So that was their former address. So those are the kind of things we do to screen tenants to make sure that they're okay. I rarely will even call on a rental reference. Never call on a rental reference. I ask for rental references because those are the people I'm going to go to if I have to go to collections. Those are the people that know who they are and where they are. So I rarely actually call on a rental reference. On a personal reference. I do always call on a rental reference, and like you say, 2 back is who I call on. We will collect the rents as well. We have a period of time, due on the 1st, late on the 6th. We impose late fees. I have a responsibility to then forward that to the owners by the 8th or the 9th or the 10th. So I'm filing 3-day pay or vacate notices by the 6th, 7th, or 8th of the month. They've got a 3-day pay or vacate, and I'm negotiating and keeping on top of them. I never let somebody go a month. I've been called in when somebody has tried to collect and be nice for 2 or 3 months, and then I get called in, and I immediately file that 3-day pay or vacate, and I will file the eviction immediately. And by that time, now you're paying $750 to go through the eviction process. But I know how to do that, and I have attorneys that work with us to do that. But I rarely have tenants that don't pay their rent, because they know I will file that 3-day pay or vacate for them on that day. And I have had occasion when I've been called in and people haven't been able to pay their rent, where I've just said, like you said, we need you to leave. Here's your money. You need to leave now. And very nicely, look, you're never going to catch up. After they get a month behind, they'll never catch up on that rent. You can just write that off. Just have them leave so that you can get it re-rented. I will actually frequently charge additional deposits if I feel that they're higher risk. If they have low credit scores, they have a great job but low credit scores, they haven't really been looking really hard. They have what I call life services. They're not paying, they're skipping out on their cell phone bills and their TV bills, so they're skipping around, or they have 2 or 3 collections for Sprint and Verizon and AT&T. Those are some of the things we look for as something to decline. But I will often ask for additional deposits, higher deposits. And a lot of people will pay that higher deposit just to get another chance to do that. And it protects me. I've often been able to use their entire deposits to protect the owner and not have them lose anything. We do market research on what the rents are. I often have owners that want, in this market, my neighbor is charging this, I can charge this. So I will frequently educate an owner about what the market rent is, and the higher the rent you want, the longer it's going to take to rent out your property. I need 3 calls a day on your property to get it rented within 2 weeks. I don't get 3 calls, it's going to take much longer. So I help educate owners about how much that is. I also work with real estate agents that are helping you purchase that investment property. I frequently will get calls and they'll ask me, okay, this is what they're telling us they're collecting in rent and how much we should be able to collect in rent. What do you know about the community or about the area? And I've been able to help them decide whether or not to actually buy that particular property at that price, because I've been able to help them see what they will actually get for that property now, as opposed to 3 years from now. So we work through those processes. We take care of property maintenance. We've got lots of different people that we work with. I don't have in-house maintenance. I just work strictly with contractors. I call them in, they take care of the property, they send us an invoice, we pay that out. So an owner never has to worry about that. I always communicate with an owner because I feel like owners should know what's going on with their property. Some of them are more like, hey, thanks, and some of them are like, tell me more. So I just get to know which owners are, hey, thanks, and some which are more, but I always feel like an owner should know what's going on with their property at all times. It may also help you in your taxes because you become an involved owner at that time, not an accountant. Talk to your accountant about that. Some aggressive accountants will consider you not a passive owner, but an active owner if you are very involved with your property that way. So we manage the budgets because you tell me what you need to collect on that property, and that's what we'll try to get, and I'll be realistic about what you can collect now for cash flow in the future, appreciation, all of those things. So we're part of helping you protect that property, because you might want to start out now with something small and then you're going to eventually move up. So we have to protect that first property you get so that you can get appreciation on it and move into additional properties to diversify your money. So that's what property managers do. If, however, you do choose to self-manage, you should become informed about the laws. The laws say that if you have less than 3 properties, you're not required to follow fair housing. However, there has been case studies where judges consider that if you own 1 piece of property, you are in the business of real estate, and that you should know the laws and that you should comply with the laws. And fair housing violations can be $10,000 per violation. So you should become informed about those things. Join up with the Utah Apartment Association per se. They can provide forms, they provide education. So if you're going to self-manage, you need to get educated and go with another association.
What are some common violations of the fair housing rules?
The most common one that we have right now is, well, there's 3. In Utah, protected source of income is a protected class, meaning somebody that's on housing, you cannot decline them. In some other states you can, but here you cannot. You have to treat them like everybody else. I have ways
You can't define them
based on their source of income.
Okay.
They still have to qualify every other way, like even that sometimes they pay a portion. They have to qualify for that portion. They have to, if they're a high credit risk, I can charge a higher deposit. And so I can get around, if I feel like they're not a good candidate and I don't have enough other reasons to decline them, I find because of the way housing works and the way our policies are, sometimes they don't always connect. Housing won't inspect an occupied property. My policy is that I try to get a lease for somebody that's moving out on one day. I get the next person to move in the next day, which means housing won't have time to inspect that vacant property. It's never going to be vacant. So these are the kind of things that you learn how to do when you're managing. So protected class, source of income. Of course, the big one is the emotional support animals. There are ways to enforce that. You don't have to just lay down and say, oh, it's an emotional support animal, I have to take it. You do, by law, have the right to verify all of that information. And when you tell people the steps you're going to take to verify it, they'll often self-eliminate. They won't call, or they won't even show up they'll make the appointment that they won't even show up. You do often get testers online. I've been caught by a tester a couple of times. I won the case because I followed all the rules. In fact, I was following the rules before the rules became the law. And so that was one of the things. You have to be careful about what you say on the phone with them. You can tell them the process, but always invite them to come and make an appointment and look at the property. So that's one of the fair housing issues that you run into. Emotional support, source of income are the big ones, and familial status, if they have children or not. Smoking is not a protected class. You can say no smokers. Emotional support animals, well, I've got 3 emotional support animals. There are circumstances they might have that, or I have an emotional support animal and he needs a companion. They don't need that. There are laws about that, and that's why I would suggest that you join up with the Utah Apartment Association that has regular meetings and regular educational events to help you navigate that if you do want to manage your own property and stay out of trouble. Okay, yes?
Let's say you don't want to bother managing your own property. How much does it cost to use a property manager?
It can cost anywhere from 7 to 10% of collected rents. The ones that are doing 7% are usually also, they have big portfolios and they're charging an additional amount to actually run the maintenance. Meaning every time they send somebody out to do maintenance, they're going to, if it's a $100 bill, they're going to charge you $105, so they're going to collect a little extra on it. Most of the management companies are going to do that. Usually it's about 8% for if an owner has multiple properties, about 9% if they have one property, and 10% for by the bedrooms for student housing type of thing. Some of them will charge additional to run the maintenance. Some of them will charge additional to go in to inspect once a year. Some companies, I will personally inspect or have my assistant inspect every 3 to 4 months. We just go in, kind of keep an eye on the property. We don't charge extra for that. We're not upcharging on our maintenance, but that doesn't mean that that's the best fit for you. You have to, I would encourage you to go and talk to several different management companies to get what those are, because if your property doesn't require much maintenance, you might want to go with a company that doesn't kind of include that in the price. I include handling maintenance in the charge of my commissions. Some companies will charge that separately so they can charge a little bit lower rate. So a newer property will require less maintenance. An older property will require more. So it just depends on what your needs are, but I do encourage you to sort of get some recommendations from your real estate agent and then actually go through and interview 2 or 3 different property managers, because I've also found that not every property manager is going to appeal to you. Their style might not appeal to you. They might be more business-like. You might be more, hey, I want that contact every month. Or they might be real chatty and you don't want that. You just want that business email every month. So also get to know who your property manager is and develop a relationship so that you feel comfortable and that they will keep you informed about your property. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. And this is why we love our property managers. Because I don't know that many of us, oh crap, who want to go through the eviction process, who want to familiarize themselves with all the laws. Yes, there is it takes away, it's part of your, the expense of operating a rental business. But this is a lot more business-like than, well, I'll check in on it, That works maybe for the first few months, but the first time you have to evict somebody, I promise you, people like LZ are worth their weight in gold. So it's very, very useful. Now I realize we're also pretty shy on time, guys, so I'm gonna go back one just to tell you what BRR is. So this is a buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and then repeat, right? It's a fix and flip with a rent involved. So you're not technically, you're rehabbing the property, so you buy it at a discount, ideally a stressed property, meaning someone who has some life event happening and that property is stressed for some reason. They need to get out of that property. You renovate, rehab it, and really, this is so important. All you need to do is make that house functional. Eric and I are working with somebody right now who he went way beyond functional. He let his wife go through there, design a bunch of things. He's 40 grand over budget.
But Pinterest said so.
Yes, Pinterest did say so, and
It's beautiful.
and it is
Social
beautiful.
online, all
It's
that.
a magnificent home, and it is $40,000 out of price range. Like it is just, he's not going to sell it for what he thinks he is. But anyway, get it to a place where it's functional. Don't add things that don't add value more than they cost. Okay, if redoing a kitchen, often going to help you, right? Get it to a functional state. Don't put granite countertops in there. They don't need granite countertops. They need Formica because that's functional and it doesn't cost very much. And it's, make business decisions. You want low cost getting into these. Then rent it, right? Get it set. This is just a note to just if you intend to refi out of that property, if you're using home equity line of credit, cash, for example, you're going to have to wait for a little while, right? You're going to have to, it's called seasoning the property. You're going to have to wait for a little while before your banks will let you refi out of that property. The biggest thing they want to know is if you got renters in there and if you got a contract to support that. And they want to see months of rent so that you appear less risky to them.
Is there
Anyway.
a certain time frame? 1 year, 2 year?
It depends on what you're doing. Like if you're vacating your primary residence and you want to count income on that, like you have to have a rental contract, and that's right off the get-go. If you have rental properties and you want to show income from rental properties, you need 2 years If you are buying an investment property and you'll have renters in there, you can actually have the appraiser do a fair market rent and count, even though you don't have renters, count that income as potential income.
Yeah.
So,
And this is a big question to ask. This appraised value. Will the bank loan or refi on appraised value? You're not talking about purchase value. Maybe you buy this house for 150K and after you rehab it, now it's worth 200K, right? The market value, you want the appraised value or after repair value. That's something we'll talk about a little bit later in our fix and flip section. But this is a recipe for essentially collecting monopolies. This is how you play the game of Monopoly in real life. That's how you do it right there. Okay, we already talked about property manager. I'm gonna go through fix and flip really quick. The two that we always hear, real estate agents, people say to me, I want a rental property. They're thinking of one of two things. They're either thinking a landlord strategy or they're thinking fix and flip. There's a lot of different ways, we've already discussed that, but this is the other major one that we talk about. It's a lot more bare bones than the landlord strategy. It's buy cheap, fix it, sell high. Like there's your strategy, right? But if you want to do this well and you want to do it right and not lose your shirt, these are the steps you follow. Do your freaking research. This is the most important thing. Find out what that house was, what it is, what it can be. What are the rents? What are you going to be doing with this?
What you can sell for when you're done, like the one that we're
Yeah.
working with right now. If he would have went and looked at what that house could sell when it was done, he would have been like, okay, that's my max.
Yes.
You can't just move your profit margin up. It doesn't. It's not going to
Yep.
work
Because
that
you
way.
put more money into
Yeah.
it, it should get more money out of it,
Yep.
right?
They call that the 70% rule. You figure out what the rent is or what the sale price is. You take off 30%, right? You take 70% of that, and that 30%, that's what your rehab costs can be. And that represents you subtract your rehab costs out, and then that 70%, that's what your maximum offer can be on that house. So if you know your house can sell for $250 or $350, the one that we're working with could sell for $350, easy. And you can pick up that house for $300, and it's going to take maybe $320 or so, or $20,000. So put your expense at $320 to rehab that property and get it sold again. You're good, man. Go. Do that deal. Offer as high as $300 for that, right? Get it for less if you can, but under no circumstances should you ever offer higher than that 70% rule, because you will get hosed. In real estate, you make money when you buy, not when you sell. You make money on a good purchase.
My parents always said never buy the nicest house on the street.
Yep. Why? It's because they all kind of average each other
Because it
out.
averages out.
And
you
the
want to be
high
on
ones
the bottom,
hold
have a
the other
nice
ones up.
house that's a smaller house,
Exactly.
because it's going to be valued for the whole street.
That's right.
The other way around.
So a lot of that is research. Don't go in stupid. You will get burned. Make network with guys like in this room, right? Know a title guy, know a lender, know people that are property managers, know people who are going to get the job for you, get the job done for you. Find investors, assemble your fix and flip team. These are handymen. These are guys who you can pay $100 a day to do whatever it is that they do, right? And you know what their set expense is, and they're fast. You want those guys, right? Locate that property, analyze the deal. This is the 70% rule. Make the offer. Manage the rehab. This is where all the sweat happens, right? The pain, the blood, the sweat, the tears. When the wife comes in with Pinterest, you got to be able to tell her no. This is where you manage the rehab. It's a job, man. It's a job. And you go in and you work and you get it done. And once you're done, then you sell that property and you move on to the next, okay? That's why the arrow says sell property, do your recon again, and just get into the next one. All right, I'm not gonna go through all this because we are short time. Price and funding. We didn't really talk about hard money loans. You guys know what hard money loans are?
Is that the ones with like the higher end, like there's just.
Hard money is exactly what it sounds like. It's easy to get, actually. It's really easy to get hard money, but it's usually more expensive, right? So,
Pay back really fast.
yeah.
Well,
You go to
short-term
Jason when you
They have
can,
penalties to pay it back early
Yeah.
usually.
yeah.
Like penalties for paying it off earlier.
Usually
Yes,
you have to keep
yeah.
it for a certain amount of time,
Is it like interest on
Yeah.
payments or something like that?
Depends.
Usually,
It
yeah.
really depends, but
I guess it depends.
they are the.
Well,
If you think of a movie with Las Vegas guys that break your knees, those are the hard money guys. You want to go to a Jason before you go do that. Okay, it can be done, and you can use it. That's the great thing. You can use hard money to get into a property and refi out. I know a lot of guys that do that. They use the hard money to get in, and it's more expensive. It might cost 7-8% to get that money, as opposed to like a 4% or something like that. But they use that money, refi out. They use that 7-8% for 4 months.
8%, man. I would kill for a hard money loan 8%.
Well, okay,
We're talking 12 to 18%.
Depends on who you go to. Like, I know a few guys who are nice to me, I guess. But
That's
anyway,
good.
question.
Why would somebody go with the hard money
Because I
over
won't give you a loan.
Because he won't give you a loan, and we're going to get into seller financing
not
as well.
qualifying?
For whatever
The property's
reason,
not habitable, you wanna buy it and sell it, and it's not habitable until you gotta get a loan to buy the house, and a regular mortgage will not lend money on that.
exactly that reason
And
right
you don't
there.
wanna get a long-term loan that's amortized over 30 years if you're only gonna hold the property for 3 or 4 months. You wanna
Right.
get in, get out, and you wanna make a quick offer that you have cash available, you go, I can close on this in a week and a half. Here's my cash,
Right.
and that's hard money
And
lending.
hard money moves fast. It's just expensive.
Yeah.
That's the price
And
of it.
that's- you just
So
have to
if you're going to do a
calculate
deal
that price on your
fast,
offer.
use hard money, get out of it.
Well, like, so on my loans, they have no prepayment penalty, but I will not lend on a loan that's gonna be paid off within 6 months.
Right.
So that's pretty expensive, because you can't get it. So then your hard money loan that you can get is now cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so even paying 12%, you pay 12% for 4 months.
Yeah.
It's not that big of an expense. You pay 12% for
is,
15 years.
Yeah.
That's a serious problem. Like
Yeah.
you lost your way when you were doing your investment class. Okay, you did it wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway, price and funding, rehabbing the property. Cheapest rehab on a property is paint. It's amazing what a coat of paint will do. Always paint your properties lighter colors because it's magical. The people come in, they love it, and they move on with life. Get flecks in your carpet because you can get it dirty and no one knows. Like, these are the secrets that people, like, you go and talk to anybody, walk into a carpet store and say, I'm buying or I'm rehabbing a house, and they'll take you to a section of carpet. They're like, stay over here in this carpet right here, because this is what you want. It's cheaper, it gets the job done, and it's not going to be horrendous to install. So anyway, reselling. We're not going to go through all these. I had a lot of fun, like, searching for fail illustrations. But here's how to flop your flip, right? There's a bunch of this stuff. We can email you guys the slides later if you want. If you would like it, let us know, and we'll email them to you. Don't have an exit strategy. Don't have a business plan. Believe what you see on TV. Who here has seen the HGTV stuff where, like, fix and flip? And that's totally real, isn't it, Greg? It's exactly like that.
So my wife and I did a pilot on HGTV for a home renovation show. We're the hosts of the show. It's a pilot show. We filmed here in Utah. We're still waiting to hear from HGTV if whether or not they're going to renew that show and do something with it. Probably not. Everything was fake.
Yeah.
Every single thing. The storyline, the house, it was all just made up. It was a storyline, and there was reality. It was based in reality because we were real and the people were real. We actually do real estate investing and we do fix and flips, my wife and I. The family was real because they were a polygamous family that was looking to remodel a house.
Oh man, that's a great
Outside
story.
of that, nothing was real. It's
Yeah.
a storyline, that's a storyline that is written by a script writer, and they say, can we make it fit with these people?
There you go.
And they have, everything is, and especially the budgets. The budgets are not real, nothing's real.
It's all fake.
It's all a
So
storyline.
just
It is
remember,
TV.
what you see on
It's
TV,
entertainment.
they're selling eyeballs. Okay, how long can I get somebody to watch this show, right?
Yep.
And that is not based on reality. So when you go out and you go, I'm going to take $15,000 and turn it into $1 million next week, that doesn't happen. Treat it like a real job. Make plans. You're going to be, over budget for repairs. Like, it's going to happen, right? Did you ever?
My favorite is that design your upgrades according to your personal taste. Like, never, ever, ever. You walk into a carpet store and you say, what's your best selling carpet? You walk into the paint store, you say, what's your best selling color?
Yep.
And that's what you paint it.
Yes. This one right here, huge deal. This rehab that we have going on, a friend of ours has going on, it looks fantastic. His wife actually made the comment she wanted to move into the rehab from her current residence. She didn't want to live in her current residence anymore. She wanted to live in the rehab because it's so much nicer than her house. And yeah, he missed the boat about 40 grand ago. Yes.
Quick question, so on there it says plan on it happening quickly? Is it,
Yes.
what's like a good time frame to plan on it, like?
It depends on the
It's
property.
ideal.
It always depends on the property. I spoke to someone last week that said, I can rehab a house in 60 days, right? Well, if you have a team, yes.
How'd yours go, Jason?
Yeah.
I said,
Yours was actually a pretty small.
yeah, it was
right?
only like 1,000 square feet and didn't need a ton of stuff done to it. Some electrical, a little bit of plumbing, flooring and paint, and there was a little bit more. But it took me, we bought it in May, and I wanted to have it ready for this, before the school year. I wanted to have it ready in August, like
So
the beginning of
4 to 5 months.
yeah.
A relatively
And
realistic time.
It was November before it was done. And I ended up, I was managing all the subs, and all the subs are busy because of all the new construction. And I just said, you know what, this is such a time consuming endeavor, I'm never doing this again. And so we're actually building another house right now, but the stipulation was that the general contractor did everything and I didn't have to touch it.
Smart.
And it-
There you go. Treat it like a business. Treat it like a business. You pay a little more, but you get your sanity back.
Right.
Right? So don't plan on this happening in a matter of weeks. Okay? Unless you have a crew and you've done this dozens of times, it's not going to happen in weeks. You may be able to pull off something like this. The guy that we're working with right now, what is he at 10 months? He's at 10 months and he's almost ready to put it on market.
He's been almost ready for a month and a half. I'm almost ready. It's gonna go up. It's almost ready. It's gonna go up.
Yeah.
I'm almost ready. It's gonna go up.
And
it's
eventually
still not
will.
up yet.
It will go up eventually, but by then he'll be in long-term capital gains. You know, like you won't have to worry about it. You know, you're not gonna. If you're this close, wait for 2 months, honestly. But anyway, there's a lot of things to think about. Biggest takeaway here: treat it like a business. You know, it will work if you treat it like a business. It won't work if you treat it like a TV show. All right. Hey, Seller Finance and Greg. Oh, you get to you want to wear mic?
I do.
There you go. Have the.
So
right there.
there's an anecdotal story. I don't know if it's true or not.
That's forward.
That's forward. Okay. Anecdotal story about Henry Ford, who had a button on his desk for about 20 different experts that he employed himself. And he did not have any idea about what any of those people did. And anytime he had a question, he pushed a button and they came in and he asked them the question how to solve a problem. Henry Ford, one of the most famous entrepreneurs in the world, had a team of people that he trusted and used for his business. That's what we're providing for you right now. So I know this is a lot of information, it's a ton of stuff, but you have a team here. So when you get to where you're gonna go, call your team and let them advise you on doing what you wanna do if you haven't done it before. Do the Henry Ford thing and push that button and get people in. So you're gonna retain about maybe 10% of what's on these screens right now. You're going to retain your team forever because they will know that. So just remember that as we're flying through at 50,000 feet on how to invest in real estate. There's a lot of stuff. Use your team. So seller financing is another way you can get into properties where there is zero money or little money from you. Or the main question is, what if you can't get a traditional loan? Either the property doesn't qualify or you don't qualify for a traditional loan, or you're selling a property and you want to open it up to buyers who might not have a traditional loan option for them. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to sell a property? Maybe you have an investment property and you want to sell it. Why would you want to sell it to somebody who can't qualify for a traditional loan? Well, there was a situation where there was a doctor who had his own practice and he was very successful, but he changed his income from W-2 to 1099. What happens when that happens? If somebody changes their income? If somebody changes their income in the middle of the year from W-2 to 1099.
They don't have a job.
Yeah. He was a doctor, he had his own practice. He took money from his own practice, W-2 income, 1099, could not qualify for a loan for another 2 years. Okay, made plenty of money. So it's not necessarily that they're bad, but what you're doing is you're opening up your sale to that slice of the people in the market who are looking to buy a home and want to give you money that you might not be able to access before. So if you're buying a property or you're selling a property, seller financing can work for you. So how that works is, does everybody understand what equity is? Like, I remember the first time I understood what equity in a property was. I was like, oh, that's what you don't owe, right? So what happens in seller financing is that the seller extends credit of their equity to the buyer. And they do that with a regular note and a trust deed, just like a bank would do. They're saying, I'm lending you $50,000. I'm lending you $200,000 toward the purchase of this property that you owe me just like a bank, but we don't exchange money. I'm just giving you credit based on how much equity I have in the property. The easiest way to think about it is if somebody owns their house free and clear and you want to buy it. There's a $200,000 property. You want to buy that. They have $200,000 to lend to you to buy the property. Why would they do that? Because they make money like a bank would on money that they are not using, basically. And there's lots of ways you can do different things, but that's basically what seller financing is, okay? The buyer takes ownership of the property. This is not a rent-to-own situation. That's a separate way to do something. You actually gain ownership of the property as the buyer, and you make payments to the seller as if they are the bank, and the seller still may foreclose. If you default on the loan, they can foreclose on that property just like a regular bank would. So that's the basic gist of what is seller financing. The seller is the bank, and the equity is the money that they lend you, okay? There are advantages and disadvantages to this. It's beneficial to a seller who can afford to wait 5 years for their equities, looking to earn a monthly positive return on their money. So what they're talking about this 5 years is that usually a seller finance, if you're seller financing a second loan, so you have a first loan in place and you're looking for a second loan, and that second loan is seller finance, usually the first loan will require that second loan remain there for 5 years. Lots of reasons why. We can talk about that later, but they're basically delaying the time that they get their money to make money on their equity, okay? The end buyer, and usually make better interest than you would in a bank. So you're lending it to somebody at a higher interest rate because it's kind of a premium product because they can't qualify. There's some things that's, anyway, you're lending it at a higher rate. The end buyer pays all the taxes and insurance on the property because it's their property. The seller is able to charge and collect a monthly income with less cost, risk, and hassle to them. Disadvantages, they're not paid the equity up front. Obviously, they have to delay gratification there. Still a chance the end buyer might still default on the loan, right? You have to go through the foreclosure process, but if you can stomach the idea of foreclosing on a property, paying a few $1,000s to get a property back by receiving a bunch of money, then I think that's a good trade-off. The buyer defaults and left the property in need of repairs, it will again be the seller's responsibility to rehab that and put it back up on the market. So there's some disadvantages and advantages for a seller. What are the advantages and disadvantages for a buyer, right? Advantages, purchasing a property with owner financing in place may be the only way a buyer is able to achieve the dream of home ownership. So you can get into a property, right? Do a seller finance if your credit sucks right now. You just had a foreclosure, you just had unpaid medical bills that wrecked your credit, or you had a short sale or something. This actually will help you rehab the credit because you get in, you don't have a traditional loan, you make payments on that loan. Those can actually be reported to your lender when you're working with your lender. So when you go buy a seller finance property, call up your lender and say, this is what I'm doing, I need to rehab my credit, how do I track this? Track the payments so that then when you need to refinance later on 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, when you want to refinance that property or you want to sell that one and move into another one, you have that credit history that builds your credit score.
So it's a way that you can achieve that dream of home ownership now instead of renting for 5 years. You buy that home now and you build your own equity in that property. Ultimately, it's easier to refinance property that you've been living in, right? So you're living there, you do a refinance on that property instead of doing a brand new purchase loan. It's easier to do that once you're in the property. Disadvantages to the end buyer, if you're unable to improve your credit score, so usually it's a short period, so they may say, okay, I'm gonna lend you $200,000 for this property and we're gonna amortize it over 20, 30 years, but you have to make a balloon payment in 5. It's due in 5 years, the whole thing. If you haven't been able to rehab your credit to refinance that property within that 5-year period, then you have to sell that property. So that's something you have to be aware of. And as well as you may lose the property and the non-refundable down payment, you know, because the seller financer is always going to require some sort of cash down. They're usually not going to do it without any cash down, unless
How much is that typically?
unless you're family. That's a good question.
Just depends.
It depends, but I would say 10,000 would be a good benchmark.
Okay.
I've
Something.
seen 10% to 20%
Yeah.
non-negotiable.
Yeah, there's got to be, I mean, seller finance lenders aren't going to have less scrutiny. It's just a shorter and easier process. They're going to want, even if you're a seller financer, you're going to want to look at that person's background. You're going to want to make sure that that person can pay that loan. Why would you lend to somebody? You're not going to lend to somebody coming and going, well, I had a bankruptcy and I can't pay my bills and I just got out of prison because I was writing fraudulent checks. You're not going to sell to that person, right? Another disadvantage is interest rates can be higher, right, than regular loan because it's negotiable. How are interest rates determined from you guys? Do you guys get to pick them? No. They're said, here's the interest rate you can charge. A seller financer does not have any of that. So they're going, if you want this property, you're going to pay 7%, not 4.5 or 3.5% on the money. All right. Things to watch out for with seller financing. There's risk for both buyer and seller. Both parties must be aware of these. Before you get into a seller financing situation, push the button, call up your expert and say, tell me about this. Okay? Understanding these risks and discussion with a professional is key. Seller finance loans are usually shorter term and at higher interest than traditional lending. We kind of talked about that. Seller finance loans are often interest only. So you're not necessarily always going to be building in equity. Some of them will be amortized over time. Some of them will be interest only. You can still build equity because you maybe have a traditional first loan and then a seller finance second loan. Getting seller financing is not always easier to obtain, even if it's a shorter process. The buyer must have an exit strategy to refinance or sell the property in a short time frame. So if you're aware of that stuff, I actually teach a 3-hour course on seller financing. It takes 3 hours to go over part of the ways that you can do seller financing. This is the 30,000 flyover. Here's what seller financing is. Talk to me about it if you ever want to do it. The end. Oh no, this is 1031. I'm still here. That's the end of seller financing. So, does anyone know what a 1031 exchange is? Ever heard of it?
I've heard of it.
1031 exchange is if you have a rental property and you want to buy another rental property or properties, but you don't want to pay capital gains tax because you don't want to receive the money, have it be counted against you as capital gains tax, which is a higher interest or a higher tax rate, and then pay that tax and then take the leftover money and buy another property. This is a way to defer paying that tax. Now, actually this morning I had a closing with a tax attorney who said it's not necessarily the only way to avoid paying capital gains tax. So before you decide you want to do a 1031 exchange, you want to talk to a tax attorney and a tax advisor and say, is it better for me to do a 1031 exchange or for you to handle it and because there's all these kind of tricks with depreciation and what's your starting basis and things that frankly I don't understand because I'm not a tax attorney. I am an attorney, but I'm a real estate attorney. I don't do tax. So this is one way to avoid paying capital gains tax. So here's what it is. It's a like-kind exchange. So you buy a property, but you have to set it up before you get into the process. Yep, because there's time frames that are involved. Okay. So basically, what it is you have a property,
You want to buy another property. You set it up where you have a third-party intermediary that when you sell that property, the funds go to that person so you don't receive them. They hold the funds until you identify a couple of different properties. You can identify up to 3 of them. And then you close on one of those properties and they pay the money for the transaction, and you bought that new property. You're basically doing a property swap, right? You sell one, you buy another one, you never touch the money and it goes into a new property. That's a 1031 exchange.
You can't pull any money out.
You can't touch the money, because if you do, then you have to pay capital gains tax. So you have to have the third-party intermediary set up before. Some people are like, well, I thought I was going to do a 1031 exchange. Well, do you have an intermediary? No, they paid it to my bank account. Well, you didn't do a 1031 exchange then. You just have to pay capital gains tax now and you're screwed. So there's a time frame within which you must do this. The total time frame is 180 days. From the time that you sell the property and you buy the other one. The first 45 days of that 180 days, you have to identify the properties that you're going to buy. Usually what you should do is, while you're marketing this one for sale, you go out and find that other one, so you basically have them under contract at the same time, okay? Because what happens if you sell the property and you don't identify another property within 45 days, the exchanger will send you your money back.
What does that
And it's
identify
over.
mean? Does that mean starting a process, like you have to make an offer on another property?
You have to tell the 1031 exchanger that you have
like
this
these are the
property
3
in
ones I'm
mind.
looking at?
Yes. Yeah, but if you don't get
Admittedly
one under
not.
contract, yeah, you have to identify the property. And I teach a class on this too, and I can't remember what that exactly is, but I think it's all you have to do is say, these are the 3 ones that I'm looking
That I'm
at.
looking
Do you,
at.
is that, can you
Yeah,
confirm
yeah.
that for
And
me?
you can
Okay.
actually, so there's a couple other rules. You can identify up to all the properties as long as you're using the bulk of your money. So like if you're exchanging out of like a hotel in Florida for millions of dollars, and you're gonna go into single family residences in a different state, as long as you use a percentage of that over, you probably just have to go from one to the
Yeah.
other.
These are complicated rules. We're talking. Let's stick to
Okay.
one. Let's stick to 1-to-1 or 1 to like
1 to 3.
duplex or something like that. Or because you can say you have a really nice rental property that's going to make you $400,000. You know, it's a primary home that you lived in and you're renting it out and you're going to sell it and you're going to get $400,000 in equity. Well, you don't have to buy just one property with that. You could buy an apartment complex. So you could use that as a down payment on a larger investment property. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a way to boost into the big ones. But that's some complicated stuff where if you have huge amounts, how much of that goes where and which and what. The gist of it is 1-to-1, 1-to-2, or 1-to-3, something like that.
But you would have had to have found that other apartment complex within those 180 days.
Yeah, you have to close, you have to consummate the purchase, close the circle within 180 days of the sale of your property. Does that make sense?
You have 45 days to actually physically start looking and letting them know that, hey,
Yeah.
these are the ones I'm looking into.
Right, and the property has to be another business. You can't buy a primary residence. It has to be investment to investment. It has to be like kind, okay?
Is that for every state?
Yes,
Okay.
because 1031 is the federal income tax code. That's code number 1031. That's the rule. That's why it's called that. And the tax attorney I was talking to this morning was talking about, well, there's a 1234 and you can always do that. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about because I've never dealt with that before. But so talk to a tax attorney before you go into it, because it may or may not be a good strategy to keep your equity. Sometimes you can do it. She was talking about retirement and giving money to like your grandkids and things like that. She's like, don't do a 1031 exchange if you're doing this and this and this and this and that. I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell them to talk to you because I don't know that stuff. So it's one way to do it, but most of the time it works. Here's basically it is. Exchange decides to sell an investment property, consult with the 1031 exchange to determine the best strategy. Once the exchange is determined, they assign their interests in the sale contract to the exchange authority, right? So that's the third party intermediary.
Do you have recommendations for those?
Well, any title company that you use, like we actually use
we work with the exchanger. Some title companies will do it in-house, and some title companies will work with the third-party exchanger. So I work with a company called Northern Exchange. And you're gonna have to do title anyway, and most of the time a title company will have somebody that will handle that. And it's not a hard process. It's like 3 or 4 extra documents you have to sign at closing, and that's about it. And then the wire for your funds goes to that person, and then they send the wire on the purchase. It's very, very simple once you set it up. You just have to know beforehand that you want to do that and set it up as you go in. So 100% of the funds are held by, what, 100% insured. That's, I don't know what that is. Exchange authority. So they notify the exchanger within 45 days the replacement property, and then they receive the replacement property after the 180 days in the funds, and it just goes 180 days. Okay, so there's one thing you can do, which is called a reverse 1031 exchange, and that's when you bought this property, and then you go, I want to get out of the loan that I'm in on this property, and I want to sell another property and 1031 exchange it. So say you have another rental property. So it's the same thing. You have to do it within 180 days. So say you buy the property first, and then you go, I actually want to do a 1031 and sell that property and put the money into this one. You can still do that if you do it within the 180 days, right? So it's called a reverse 1031 exchange, but it's the same concept. You still have to do it within 180
Deadline
days.
to sell instead of a deadline to buy.
Exactly, but you use the funds to swap, and you pay off the financing on this one. You know, maybe you got a hard money loan, and then you sell it and then turn the money into that, pay off the hard money loan or whatever. So you can still do it. It's just in reverse order. Still has the same exact rules. It's just you sell before you buy. I mean, you buy before you sell. That's what it was. Okay, that's it.
Shorting the market.
No, almost. Yeah. Okay.
All right. And we're just about done, so we will realize that we've kept you over time. All right. Yeah, by a little, you know, like a couple minutes isn't it? All right, anyway. So you guys all know this scene in Finding Nemo. Do you have your exit buddy, right? And they had a plan for getting out of the EAC. Have a plan, you know. Whenever you go into whatever investment strategy you choose, if it's a landlord strategy, fix and flip strategy, if it's a buy your own house and then you're going to rent it later strategy, it doesn't matter. Know how you're going to get out of that strategy. Okay, how are you going to exit? If you don't know that, you're not an investor. Period. If you don't know your exit strategy, you don't know what you're doing as an investor, and by definition, you don't have a plan. So you're not an investor, you're a fly-by-nighter. Okay, so here just a couple of mistakes. We've iterated some of these. You know, don't know when to walk away, right? That's one of the bigger mistakes that we see. Allowing your emotion, this is a huge one. As soon as you allow emotion to influence the process, you're done for. The market will eat you alive and spit you out because it doesn't like how you taste. And speaking with a lender too late in the process, you know, talking if you need to get to a 1031 or you know stuff like that, you need to make sure you talk to those people in advance. Good lenders will help you. Like a lender is kind of for life, you know. He's going to help you rehab your credit. He's going to help you get into this loan. He's going to help you get out of that loan or refi it. He's going to help you get into the next property. You want a lender in your pocket all the time. It's one of the reasons I love Jason. That sounded awkward, but you know what I mean. Not having an exit strategy, you know, limiting yourself to a specific market. You know what? I'm only going to buy within 5 miles of my house. I had a real estate guy or a client tell me that. I'm only going to buy within 5 miles of my house because I can drive by that house and I can see how they're doing. And within 5 miles of his house, he's got $600,000 properties and he's got $400,000 properties and nothing less than that.
And he's emotionally tied to it.
And he's emotionally tied to the area. He's already got enough strikes against him. He's already out. I'm trying to help him find a property, but he's not going to find a property. So anyway, budget, just plan to have things you didn't count on. Plan on it because they're going to happen. Okay? Have a get-rich-quick mentality. Do poor research. Yeah, these are all ways to submarine your deal or your collection of deals. Okay, and all of these, really the point of this slide is to show you, just like Greg was talking about with, I push a button and I get the expert that I need. We know all of these things, right? You don't have to know these things. Talk to us, we'll help you get to where you need to be. And then a couple of takeaways. I love this one. Treat it like a job, There's hundreds of different ways to invest. You can be as active or as passive as you like. It's a creative process. How do you think people came up with 1031s? Like some dude's thinking it through and he's like, I don't have to pay capital gains if I do this and this and this and this, and Uncle Sam's never going to see it. Those are creative people at work. It is a creative process. And getting into and out of these deals, it's fun. It's fun. That's why one of the reasons we do is to get paid, right? But the other reason we do it is to, for the challenge. We like to do it. Leverage your creativity. It's not for fast money, but it's also not complicated. It's not impossible. Anyone can do this if you sit down and put your mind to it and create a plan. All right. And I think that's about it. All right. So what's your next step? You're going to start looking at properties. You're going to start getting your cash together, rehabbing credit. You're going to start writing a business plan. Whatever you want to do, come talk to us. We're ready for you. And this is Winston Churchill. A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist, or I would say an investor, sees the opportunity in every difficulty. The end. There you go. All right. Do we have any questions before we wrap up? I know we're really over time, but I appreciate you guys sticking with us to the end. No questions? I just want to ask you really quick. Just